to Let's Talk Computer Science. I'm your host, Sandy Padala, CEO at Rex Academy. Rex Academy is a one-stop solution for computer science. Joining me in this week's episode is Mr. Jay Flores.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Jay is deeply devoted to STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. He's a global STEM ambassador and keynote speaker, influencing students to create cool things and motivating them to become tomorrow's innovators. As the creator of one of the most innovative brands in STEM education, it's not magic, it's science. Jay performs magical experiments to increase excitement and awareness in STEM. With a growing fan base, Jay uses his social media platforms to showcase how science and math can help solve problems. He holds a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from University of Wisconsin-Madison. Jay, we are so excited to have you on our podcast, Let's Talk Computer Science.
Yes, again, thank you for having me. I'm really excited about the topic and go Badgers.
Yep, go Badgers. Yep. So I am so excited to learn more about you today. So tell me more about your work and how did you get to where you are today? It's a very, amazing what you're doing.
Thank you. So I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My mother studied psychology, and she was an elementary school psychologist. And my father didn't go to college, but he gained a technical experience through the military. And so that mix of my mother's kind of side of helping people and my dad's kind of technical side is what I think have become. And like I've evolved into a problem solver that helps people and specifically addressing the STEM gap and increasing diversity in STEM and helping young people understand that the power of math and science can help them do really cool things that can change the world and also just make their lives a lot better. Because there was a lot of organizations and universities that helped me get to where I was. You know, I had been told that I was good at math and science and I should look into engineering, but I didn't really know what that meant. And that guidance is what helped me get there. And then also what inspired me to start then giving back. And it started with just small conversations to small groups of middle or high school students nearby or back in my hometown. And then started evolving into larger speaking engagements, TEDx talks, conferences. Eventually, after a couple of years of engineering myself, it turned into my career, to which what I was doing as a volunteer for the company. The company asked me to do it full time as the Global STEM Ambassador at Rockwell Automation. And then at the beginning of 2021, I went off on my own and launched my own business doing very similar work. So it stems from just being very grateful for all the people that helped me understand what engineering was and how I could apply it to make my life better and create things that make the world better, to then now helping more and more people understand that themselves too, and solving problems that they're passionate about.
Okay, so can you walk me through a little bit about like a day of like what you do in your day or like in a week?
Yeah, so there's no specific day. It's always changing, but I love that it evolves. But in general, I do different types of partnerships with organizations that are trying to promote STEM in the community. So that could be working with a corporation to create experiments that engage their community in a relevant way to what they create. So helping them bridge that gap between what the student is aware of and the engineering and science that it takes to create the products that they're creating. I do a lot on social media as well with brand partnerships there. The one of the most specific areas and kind of what you mentioned earlier was with the brand It's Not Magic, It's Science. We do science nights and keynote speeches at conferences that really help attract and connect with students in a unique way to science. So I chose magic because it's inclusive, right? Whether you're a boy or a girl, you're rich, you're poor, old, young, everybody can be mind blown by magic, right? It's something that's kind of universal. Um, and it's also, so I wanted to reach people that weren't already looking for science. So I launched it during the pandemic when I knew that kids would still be on TikTok. I knew that they would still go through their phone, no matter how sick of Zoom calls they were, no matter how sick of virtual school, and how challenging math or science must have been to teach virtually. They were still going to be on TikTok. And it did really well because I designed it for that. And we reached millions of students, hopefully most of them, which weren't already looking. They were just scrolling, they were bored, and then they come across this thing that kind of was like, whoa, how did he do that? And then the explanation, because I'm a scientist and not a magician, I can tell you the secret, allows them to then learn a little bit more and want to then explore that science further. And then this year we launched a kit. So now we can also send the materials to families and they can then go and do it themselves, because it was great for me to see those reactions of people like, being like, wow, that's really cool. But if they're not engaging in the science themselves, if they don't feel part of it, that next step of them actually then going on and studying, computer science or chemistry or mechanical engineering is not as likely. So I wanted to make sure we're guiding them through that whole process, from that initial spark of inspiration to them learning a little bit more of the explanation behind the magic, to then them actually exploring it and going on further. So um, it's a wide variety of things, but I'm always just trying to find those unique ways to lead with passion behind STEM instead of just STEM. Like, let's connect it to what the kids are already passionate and excited about.
So you're like a social media influencer,
Yep,
influencing the kids with the right things, with the things they need to get influenced by. That
exactly.
is so awesome. Thank you. I mean, I'm sure like many moms like me would thank you for putting this kind of content than them getting influenced by
Yeah,
uh,
those are the
stuff.
best messages I get, are the ones from parents. Especially I got one that I'll never forget. She's like, I walked home and there was water everywhere in the kitchen, and I was like, "What is going on here?" And she's like, "Oh, it must have been another one of those experiments from Jay," and it was. It's she allowed her daughter to explore, get a little bit messy in the kitchen, as long as it was safe, obviously, and that her daughter's going to be that much more better off because of it, because she can continue to explore that curiosity that oftentimes at end of elementary, beginning of middle school, students tend to kind of stray away from some of those if they don't have real life fun examples of how to apply the science and math that they're learning in the classroom. A worksheet can only inspire you so much.
Yep. Yeah. Can you please tell me a little bit about your travel that you have done in the past month?
Yeah. So, well, the past month was a little bit more just because of vacation. We wanted to go to Ecuador and Peru, but there's a lot of science that kind of I uncovered there. And specifically, I'm not Peruvian or Ecuadorian. My family from Puerto Rico, but a lot of our science, like history and culture, was somewhat erased or kind of hidden, I guess, after conquest. Right? If you think of some of the Inca um, landmarks that I was able to visit in Peru, like Machu Picchu, for example, there's a lot of science there, and engineering that's absolutely incredible, especially for that time. But for whatever reason, our community doesn't see it like that anymore, or we don't see ourselves as a STEM community anymore. But those are our roots, our origin. They had a lot of agricultural engineering. They would experiment with different elevations and amounts of moisture, and they created like 200 plus types of corn, and potatoes and all these things that were really impressive. I just shared a video yesterday on TikTok of an area that they had that was outside, where originally archaeologists thought were kind of arenas for sports, but they found out that that area was really good for echo. And so I in the experiment, I clap and you can hear the really cool echo. And so back then, when there weren't microphones or loudspeakers, they would use that as a gathering space for large meetings because the voice would echo for important announcements or meetings. It would echo and more people could hear it. So there's all these really cool examples that are part of our culture and history that may not again may have been hidden or suppressed or not celebrated as much that I really want to help uncover. And I think that's one of the big things with representation in STEM is that oftentimes our young people don't see themselves in it. So why would they dream of being that if they've never even met a computer scientist, or they have no clue what it is we're talking about? You need to find those connections that are relevant to them, and then also the real world connections that be like, okay, that's why I would want to learn what a loop is, or so I can do this type of thing in the real world.
Yep, that is so cool. Thank you so much for sharing with us. I've, I mean, I immediately want to go to Machu Picchu.
Yes, it was wonderful. There's another really cool one. I have a GPS watch, and they had this stone that, if you didn't know this, it would look like just a random big stone in the middle of a walkway, and it's like, why is this here? But over time, or someone was able to find out that it lined up directly with the north, south, east, west coordinates. So even back then, without being able to measure that as well as we can today, they were able to navigate and understand what direction they were going in based on that route.
Yep. Yeah, and with the sun, the probably it might work as a clock as well with the shade and
Yep. Yeah, they would use the sun a lot too. There was different temples and different. They would even use windows for like summer solstice. So on the day that the sun is, I guess, longest, it would align with a certain part of the temple. So they had like all these different really cool ways of measuring things, and even just getting the materials there. The engineering feat that it was to get that kind of heavy stones, the way that they would align them. They're also ready for earthquakes because it's they're on tectonic plates down there in Peru. There was actually not nearby us, but at the same time we were there was a large seven magnitude earthquake down there. So that was kind of scary, but it was far away.
yes.
And so they had to design for that as well. And again, today buildings fall down during those types of things. So imagine the thought and engineering it would take to design that back then.
Yep. Yes. Yeah. It is super impressive. So I want to talk a little bit about computer science, as computer science is part of STEM.
Mhm.
So, what are your thoughts on computer science education in schools right now, and how can schools increase?
Yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity, but I'm also a little bit worried that we're not ready for that opportunity. I feel that computer science needs to be viewed as just as important as reading and writing. If we could flip that switch in the minds of administrators, educators, state governments, even take it to the White House. There needs to be that switch to understand that computer science is just as important as reading and writing, and that we need to start very young. Um, and we need to have those resources available for families, for teachers, for students early on. I think in, I don't know how many years exactly, but not being able to code is just going to be just as challenging as what we see today as not being able to read, right? Um, and if we can get that right, it's going to change the world very fast, in a, I believe, a very positive way. The breakthroughs that we could have, if I'm not sure the numbers exactly, but if we increase the percentage of the population that is able to have these skills, even a basic literacy of it, not necessarily everyone has to be a full-time computer scientist,
Right.
but if society as a whole has a much greater literacy of it, um, so many great things could come of it. And I think of even just other industries, like if you could easily program a website for your cupcake business, right? Like that could have a significant impact for you. Or if you could, create a little program that captures some data for your business, even if it's not necessarily a full-time computer science type business, just having that basic knowledge can increase your success significantly.
Yep, totally agree. Like with companies such as Tesla, even car mechanics needs to have some basic computer
Yeah.
skills.
It's crazy how many lines of code go into a car now. And I think actually, I don't know if this stat is still true, but the last time I went to visit Lockheed Martin with the aerospace defense company, this was before the pandemic, I believe they wrote more lines of code than Microsoft, which
Oh, wow.
you view Microsoft or
Mhm.
like Apple as like these coding companies, but there's a lot of code that goes into a fighter jet, right? There's a lot of information going through there. So involved in a lot of areas that as a society, I don't think we understand completely. And that's another important aspect. In addition to starting young and viewing it as kind of as important as reading and writing, we need to help young people understand the many places where computer science impacts life and where they can have careers, because those aren't always as obvious as some of the other careers that students might be interested in or know about.
Yep. So, what do you think are ideal solutions um, so that we can increase computer science education?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is the teacher aspect, right? Because a teacher can make a significant amount more in industry than they can in the school system. Um, but I think that there are a lot of basic principles that can be incorporated into education early on. I think of events like the Hour of Code. Most teachers, parents, and even students on their own can often pick up something like the Hour of Code and get started, right? And start to learn a little. And so if we can make that barrier to entry um, simple like that with programs like Hour of Code, the work that you're doing, and other similar experiences um, for both the teachers and the students, that can have a significant impact. And then making it more accessible, because there are a significant amount of students that haven't even touched even something like the Hour of Code or other programs. Um, and the more accessible that is, and the more knowledge there is at that base level, that can spark enough curiosity for students to want to then pursue more. Because the other thing I look at is that even schools, for example, that might teach computer science at the high school level, because there has been no introduction to it earlier, it's usually an elective. And there aren't very many students that are going to select that elective because they have no background and there may be some fear or concern. They're going to go for something that sounds a little bit easier potentially, or at least more familiar. And so I did I think it was like an HTML class in high school, but honestly, I think it was because I didn't really have many other options on my schedule, versus the fact that I really just really wanted to learn about computers and coding, right? Um, if I would have gone through the Hour of Code in elementary school or something similar, I would have been all over it. Or even just experiences like First Robotics, for example, that through First Lego League, as young as 6 years old, they're being exposed to some block coding, and they have that fun application of the robot, and they can say, my code helped this robot complete this task. More and more of those opportunities at a young age are extremely important, and then supporting the teachers and mentors that can guide them.
Yep, yes, totally. I totally agree. I love the fact, like, there's so many things that you have said, and totally like how you said, like, if kids are not exposed at a young age, they wouldn't just even try it, maybe because they're just never heard of, not just because of the familiarity.
Exactly.
It's not a complicated subject, but people assume that's
Mhm.
complicated.
Yeah, and I was an example. So I did really well in school. I had good grades, but I went from a middle school to a high school where I was the only student making that transfer to that particular school. I went to a private middle school, and then I went to public high school. And so I had no really background or reference of what most people do. So I went and I chose the classes that seemed the easiest, right? Because that's just the default as a young person. Even though I was smart, it didn't in my brain it didn't make sense to go after all the hardest things. Fortunately, I did have a few teachers, specifically an English teacher, I chose the freshman English class instead of the track that would put me on track for IB, or which is similar to AP for those who may not be familiar with IB classes. He encouraged me to transfer over to the pre-IB class as a freshman. If I would not have had that push, I would have stayed in that class. Now, if I would have had someone in the science or math side to then, encourage me to guide over to that, or if I would have had that previous familiarity, it would have made it so much easier for me not to just choose that what I thought was going to be the easiest route.
Yep. Yeah. So, going back to your point of shortage of CS teachers, like these days, there's very few qualified educators in general, and even more shortage in computer science. So, what do you think the idea of remote computer science teachers to address this shortage? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a subject that's so important that we need to make it as easy as possible. I think the country is, in the world actually in general, is getting more used to the idea of remote work. You're seeing a lot of the leading computer science employers uh, continuing remote work for an extended period of time. So this is something that's actually going to be very normal in the industry at the professional level, right? So I think that will allow more flexibility and access to students, especially in areas, if you think of certain areas where there is underrepresentation in general, or there may not be much of a computer science industry, for example, like an area that's more agricultural engineering versus Silicon Valley, right? There's tons of programming and coding that can go into that agricultural area, but it's not known as the thing in this space. It's not known as the thing that students go on and do later on, right? And so having access to coaches, teachers, mentors, however the system might be set up virtually to help teach these subjects can have a significant impact, and then can also help spread the resources out.
Yep. Yep. Totally. Any other things? Any final words?
Yeah, so I think it's very important for us again to start very young. It will take time, but it's the right investment that will actually move the needle. If we're starting off later in high school or college, they're good investments, but it's not going to have that needle moving effect. In order to have that needle moving effect, you need to start young, invest at those early ages, and then continue to grow that support over time, so that by the time that the students are older, they have that background, the familiarity, the foundation to be able to then go on and take the subject much further. That will also help with the teaching problem in the long term, because what do most teachers choose to to teach? Something that they liked when they were younger, right? You're
Yeah.
not going to go and
Yep.
teach the subject that was like was
You
a
never
nightmare
heard
for
of
you,
it.
or
Right.
that you never even studied, right?
Right.
So that will then also help with the teacher problem, because a lot more of those students will continue to grow in that passion, will also have a passion for education, and will connect those two dots, and provide those opportunities. And then finally, the organizations, the companies that are hiring this talent need to continue to invest in the future of that education as well, or else there's always just going to be this shortage and battle for talent, which is going to be a challenge always. So in general, but especially with computer science, let's start young. Let's make sure that we're giving young people fun, real life examples that are either connected to what they're passionate about or what they're excited about. And that will help them then have the tools and resources that they need to invent the change that they want to see in the world in the future.
Yep. Yes, totally agree. And yeah, I really like the point where you have mentioned like the companies who hire these people need to make a long-term investment in this.
Mhm.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time. I'm super thrilled to talk to you, and thank you for all the work that you're doing, especially being a good influencer on social media for kids. So thanks,
Thank you.
being a
I,
mom. Thank you so much.
thank you. I appreciate what you're doing as well. And yeah, let's keep inspiring young minds.